Well, hi, Wade. I'm so glad you could join me today in answering some questions for your upcoming course titled Motivating the Unmotivated,
Thank you.
Teaching the Hard to Reach Student.
Yes, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, we are as well. And I have a few questions for you just in talking about your course. So let's get started.
Okay.
First one is, what is the stages of studenting and how does it relate to motivating students?
Well, that's a really good question because when I wrote the article, Stages of Studenting, which appeared in the Principal Leadership Journal of April 2018, I believe, I was working with a student who had recently, his father had recently been killed with altercation with the police. And he was very depressed and was not turning in work. And this was a student who was not a great student, but he was very consistent. And it took him about 18 months to fully grieve and come back. But in the middle of that, we were trying to figure out just to hold on to him. He was a kid who was really easy, could have easily slipped into using drugs or just dropped out of school entirely, or all possibilities could have happened to him. And we did not have a mechanism for reaching him to where he was in that moment. And he was in a stage of grieving, for heaven's sake. It was just tough. And we kept wanting to motivate him. There's the key word, motivate him, right? To do more work, to turn his work in, to participate in class or whatever. But he just wasn't there. So what I realized is we needed to meet students where they are. And he was not a student who was ready to do academic work. So how do we acknowledge that and still keep him engaged in the student, or what I call studenting activities? That was the dilemma we were in. And so I invented this thing called Stages of Studenting. And I acknowledged that he was attending on a regular basis, which is like stage 2. He was going to all of his classes, stage 3. What he was not doing is he was not prepared for learning. He just showed up, but he would put his head down on his desk or whatever. So he was in stage 3 successfully, but we could push him to stage 4 to participate, to be a part of class. But it isn't until stage 6 where they start turning work in. And when I told the teachers where he was, they stopped pushing him to produce work, which is way up at stage 6. And they just tried to push him to engage in class, to be a part of class, to bring materials, to whatever, to push him to stage 5 and then, or stage 4 and then stage 5. And we were able to hold on to him. And after about 12 to 18 months, he actually started producing work. He started doing what had to be done. And yes, he missed a lot of school in terms of turning work in and getting credits, but he was engaged in the process and he was able to avoid getting involved in all those things that kids who are struggling could get involved in. And the significant thing is not just that he did better, but the teachers felt better about how to relate to him. Instead of constantly hassling him to turn work in, they were coming up with creative ideas of just to push him to that next level, that next stage. Very successful in those kinds of communications. And since then, we've had a lot of success with other students to motivate them to actually engage in the studenting process. Not necessarily always to get in work immediately, but down the road they would, because they engaged in the step-by-step process.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important aspect, that it's a tool that educators can refer to, that students can refer to, and that parents can refer to as well.
Actually, that is a really good point, because what we saw happening is that the parents started to understand what was going on for their struggling students in a better way. And parents became a part of the conversation. Plus, we also could communicate with other professionals more successfully, because we could tell them a student is at a stage 3 or a stage 4, and then they could help us with some interventions from their expertise on how to address the student who's in that stage. It all comes down to meeting the student where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a really great model to follow. So, second question, I know
Yeah.
that you have had a large focus in literacy, and how is reading such an integral part of motivation for an unmotivated student?
That is a really good question because it actually kind of surprised me. But what I found when I was developing the Read Through It strategy is that the main barrier with students who struggle with reading is that they don't believe they can improve their reading. And the research actually emphasizes that a student who struggles with reading very early in their learning to read process identifies with being a slow reader, and they don't let go of that. I mean, they once they're a slow reader in third grade, fourth grade, whenever they realize that they're not a very good reader, they hold on to that through their whole schooling career.
Mm.
So I found that belief in who they are as a reader became the real barrier. And so I created the Read Through It strategy specifically with the intent of addressing this issue of having confidence. So I call it confidence first, then comprehension. So they learn to feel okay about their reading skills, and then they're more willing or more motivated to actually engage in the reading process.
Okay, that's very neat how those two combine. That's not something that I would have thought of, but that makes complete sense of the correlate between the two.
Well, reading is very basic, right? I mean, people who don't read never admit it because it's taken for granted that you know how to read. And so we don't really talk about it. It's one of those, it's okay for a student to say, well, I'm not really a math person kind of thing. I mean, even adults say things like that. But you will rarely hear a student say, yeah, I'm not a very good reader, unless they're asked directly. But it's so basic that the stigma of being a struggling reader becomes the barrier to improving. And that's why motivation is such a key issue. Is give them the confidence and empower them with the ability to move ahead, to engage in the process.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for sharing those two kind of informational points. I really think that your seminar online is going to be incredibly helpful for a lot of educators, which we should note, it's also for, grades 3 through 12. So you have a wide grade range that can attend. But thank you for joining us today, and we really look forward to your course in the fall.
And I look forward to it. Thank you very much, Julianne.